In this video, I just want to clarify how we talk about the direction of a vector, and this is especially something that I think needs to be clarified when it comes to map coordinates. So the reason for this video is that several of you have been to office hours and I've had a chance to grade a couple weeks of homework now, and I frequently see someone who looks like they understand how vectors work, and then when you get to the part where you're expressing a vector direction, the expression of it that you are choosing is either unclear or perhaps even wrong. So I don't want you to be in that situation. Let's take a look at how it happens. I think one of the main points of confusion that can come up is how we measure an angle depends on whether we view it as mathematicians or as navigators. So the way a mathematician, for example, would describe the direction of this vector, you might be familiar with the terms quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, but certainly the way mathematicians measure angles is the way that you would have been taught in school, and that is to start on the positive x-axis and work your way counterclockwise to where the ray is pointed. And so the direction of this particular angle would be the 90 degrees plus whatever this amount of angle is, which here we're saying is 40 degrees, for a total of 130 degrees. That's how we would describe this direction as a mathematician. But that same direction would not be described in the same way by navigators. Navigators select 0 to be due north and measure all angles in a clockwise direction from due north. So to a navigator, that same direction on a map would be instead described as 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus this remaining 50 degrees here for a total of heading 320 degrees. So where does that leave us if we are in a class like this and you're trying to describe the direction of this vector that is shown here? Is it 130 degrees or is it 320 degrees? And the answer is that either one of those could be considered correct in certain circumstances. So either one of those is actually kind of unclear. When you give an answer and I don't know which context you mean, it's a little tough. In other words, there's a better way than to describe this angle as 130 degrees or 320 degrees and to assume that you and I are both looking at this in the same context. And I do think the best way for you to do this is for you to draw on here which angle you're talking about and then tell me this angle is 50 degrees or this angle is 40 degrees. Whichever way you do that, if you are correct, then I will give you credit. Labeling really is the clearest answer. And I'd like to emphasize, I like that so much that I tried to model it when I was introducing vectors. So this was an example that was in the video where I first introduced vectors, I think, or at least where I first introduced the idea of talking about them in 2 dimensions. And I labeled this angle, theta, and then went in and told you that the theta I labeled is 32.9 degrees. That 32.9 degrees is not the full correct answer in terms of how a mathematician would talk about it, or in terms of how a navigator would talk about it, but everyone can recognize what angle I'm talking about and evaluate whether that angle is 32.9 degrees as drawn. So that is a really clear way to describe the direction. I do want to emphasize, I haven't seen a lot of this so far this semester, but I still feel like I should mention this. The east, west, north, south is only appropriate when you are talking about map directions. So you don't want to try to introduce it in a problem like this one, where the airplane was flying horizontally, but we don't know if it's flying south or north or kind of off to the southeast somewhere. We don't know. So when we describe this angle, theta, that is labeled here, that is a theta with respect to a horizontal direction. And that horizontal direction could be north or south or east or west. We have no idea, therefore we should not bring those terms in. We just want to label the theta and say it's this many degrees. Notice here at the bottom of the screen I've labeled it as negative 51.2 degrees, and then up here I've said it's this angle. I think I mentioned it in the video where I first showed this image. You don't need to call that negative 51.2 degrees if you've labeled that theta. I will know what it is that you mean, and that is good enough for me, so it should be good enough for you, at least in this course. If you have any questions about any of this material or any other part of what we've been talking about, please do try to pop into office hours or email me.